2021, in a book called The Measles Book, you wrote that parents had been, quote, misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease and that measles vaccines are necessary, safe, and effective. The reality is measles are in fact deadly and highly contagious, something that you should have learned after your lives contributed to the deaths of 83 people, most of them children, in a measles outbreak in Samoa. So my question here is, Mr. Kennedy, is measles deadly, yes or no?
Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I have the record that I'll give to the chairman, and he can make his judgment about what you said. Did you write in your book, and it's undeniable, that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS? Yes or no, Mr. Kennedy?
I'm not sure if I made that.
Okay, I'll give it to the chairman, Mr. Kennedy. It's too important for the games that you're playing, Mr. Kennedy. And I hope my colleagues will say to the president, I have no influence over him. I hope my colleagues will say to the president, out of 330 million Americans, we can do better than this.
All right, let me do a last question because I'm running out of time. I think the gist of what you're trying to say today is you're really pro-vaccine, you want to ask questions. You have started a group called the Children's Health Defense. You're the originator. Right now, as I understand it, on their website, they are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now, you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine.
Mr. Kennedy, you have spent years pushing conflicting stories about vaccines. You say one thing, and then you say another. In your testimony today under oath, you denied that you were anti-vaccine. But during a podcast interview in July of 2023, you said, quote, no vaccine is safe and effective. In your testimony today, in order to prove you're not anti-vax, you note that all your kids are vaccinated. But in a podcast in 2020, you said, and I quote, you would do anything, pay anything to go back in time and not vaccinate your kids. Mr. Kennedy, all of these things cannot be true. So, are you lying to Congress today when you say you are pro-vaccine? Or did you lie on all those podcasts? We have all of this on tape, by the way.
Yeah, Senator, as you know, because it's been repeatedly debunked, that statement that I made on the Lex Friedman podcast was a fragment of the statement. He asked me, and anybody who actually goes and looks at that podcast and will see this. He asked me, are there vaccines that are safe and effective? And I said to him, some of the live virus vaccines are. And I said, there are no vaccines that are safe and effective, and I was going to continue for every person. Every medicine has people who are sensitive to them, including vaccines.
Right, so
he interrupted me at that point. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV. You know about this, Senator Wyden, so bringing this up right now is dishonest.
let's be clear about what you've actually done then, since you want to deny your statements. For example, you have a history of trying to take vaccines away from people. In May of 2021, you petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to not only block Americans from having access to the COVID vaccine, but to prevent any future access to the life-saving vaccine. Are you denying that? Your name is on the petition.
We brought that petition after CDC recommended the COVID vaccine without any scientific basis for 6-year-old children. Most experts agree today, even the people who did it back then, that COVID vaccines are inappropriate for 6-year-old children who basically have a zero risk from COVID. That's why I brought that lawsuit. I don't want to, I want to emphasize
Mr. Kennedy, the facts.
The committee will be in order. And to the audience.
Senator, I'm not against vaccine.
If you'll hold off for a second, Mr. Kennedy. To the audience. Comments from the audience are inappropriate and out of order. And if there are any further disruptions, the committee will recess until the police can restore order. Please follow the rules of the committee. Mr. Kennedy, you may proceed.
I also want to point out that your recitation of what happened in Samoa is absolutely wrong, and you know it's wrong.
We'll get to that in a moment. Right now, we're talking about the petition that you filed to block Americans from having access to the vaccine and to prevent any future access to the vaccine. Those facts are on the record. My third question to you is, you made almost $5 million from book deals, mostly promoting junk science. In 2021, in a book called The Measles Book, you wrote that parents had been, quote, misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease and that measles vaccines are necessary, safe, and effective. The reality is measles are, in fact, deadly and highly contagious, something that you should have learned after your lies contributed to the deaths of 83 people, most of them children, in a measles outbreak in Samoa. So my question here is, Mr. Kennedy, is measles deadly, yes or no?
The death rate from measles historically in this country in 1963, the year before the introduction of the vaccine, was 1 in 10,000. Let me explain what happened in Samoa. In Samoa, in 2017 or 2015, there were 2 kids who died following the MMR vaccine. And the vaccination rates in Samoa dropped precipitously from about 63% to the mid-30s, so they've never been very high. And in 2018, 2 more kids died following the MMR vaccine, and the government of Samoa banned the MMR vaccine. I arrived a year later when vaccination rates were already below any previous level. I went there, nothing to do with vaccines. I went there to introduce a medical informatics system that would digitalize records in Samoa and make health delivery much more efficient. I never gave any public statement about vaccines. You cannot find a single Samoan who will say, I didn't get a vaccine because of Bobby Kennedy. I went in June of 2019. The measles outbreak started in August. Oh, clearly I had nothing to do with the measles. Not only that,
Mr. Kennedy,
Senator, not only that, if you let me finish, Senator.
You have had some time.
If you let me finish, Senator, if you let me finish, there are 83 people died when the tissue samples were sent to New Zealand. Most of those people did not have measles. We don't know what was killing them. The same outbreak occurred in Tonga and Fiji, and no extra people died. There were 7 measles outbreaks in the 13 years prior to my arrival.
I just would like to get my time back. The nominee wrote a book saying that people had been misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease. He's trying now to play down his role in Samoa. That's not what the parents say. That's not what Governor Green says. It's time to make sure that we blow the whistle on actually what your views are. At least we're starting.
We need to move
Senator,
on.
I support the measles vaccine. I support the polio vaccine. I will do nothing as HHS secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking either of those
Anybody
vaccines.
who believes that ought to look at the measles book you wrote saying parents have been misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease. That's not true.
Mr. Kennedy, what is so disturbing to me is that out of 330 million Americans, we're being asked to put somebody in this job who has spent 50 years of his life not honoring the tradition that he talked about at the beginning of this conversation, but peddling in half-truths, peddling in false statements, peddling in theories that, create doubt about whether or not things that we know are safe are unsafe. Not that every vaccine in America is unsafe, not that you can't possibly have an adverse reaction, but that parents and children in my old school district and school districts all over this country would be better off not getting vaccinated than getting vaccinated. Unlike his own children who were vaccinated, unlike the people he invited to his house in Los Angeles for their party who were vaccinated. For everybody else, it's about peddling these half-truths. And he says it with such conviction that you want to believe him. And Mr. Kennedy, I just have there are many, many things in the record, but I hope that you could answer these questions yes or no. I've tried to ask these in a manner that's faithful to what you actually said because I didn't want to have a debate about whether you actually said them. So I'm asking you yes or no, Mr. Kennedy. Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people?
I didn't say it was deliberately targeted. I just quoted an NIH-funded and NIH published study.
Did you say that it targets black and white people but spared Ashkenazi Jews?
I quoted a study, Your Honor. I quoted an NIH study that showed that
I'll take that as a yes.
races
I have to move on, I have to move on. Did you say that Lyme disease is highly likely a materially engineered bioweapon? I made sure I put in the highly likely. Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of Lyme
I want all of
disease
our
said.
colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy. I want them to hear it. You said yes. Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I have the record that I'll give to the chairman, and he can make his judgment about what you said. Did you write in your book, and it's undeniable, that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS? Yes or no, Mr. Kennedy?
I'm not sure if I made that.
Okay, I'll give it to the chairman, Mr. Kennedy. And my final question, did you say on a podcast, and I quote, "I wouldn't leave abortion, to the states. My belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have the government involved, even if it's full term." Did you say that, Mr. Kennedy?
Senator, I believe that every abortion is a tragedy.
Did you say it, Mr. Kennedy? This
believe
matters. It doesn't matter what you come here and say that isn't true, that's not reflective of what you really believe, that you haven't said over decade after decade after decade, because unlike other jobs we're confirming around this place, this is a job where it is life and death for the kids that I used to work for in the Denver public schools and for families all over this country that are suffering from living in the richest country of the world that can't deliver basic health care and basic mental health care to them. It's too important for the games that you're playing, Mr. Kennedy. And I hope my colleagues will say to the president, I have no influence over him. I hope my colleagues will say to the president, out of 330 million Americans, we can do better than this.
Thank you. We
Sanders.
need to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, thanks for being with us. I very much like the slogan that you coined, "Make America Healthy Again." And I strongly agree with that effort. Despite spending, as you indicated, 2 or 3 times as much per capita on health care as other nations, we have 85 million people who are uninsured, underinsured. We have all kinds of chronic illnesses. Our life expectancy is lower than other countries. And for working class people in this country, they are living 6, 7 years shorter lives than the top 1%. We got a problem, okay? And I'm going to suggest some ideas that I think can remedy that. Last year, the insurance industry in this country made over $70 billion, while at the same time, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Do you agree with me that the United States should join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Yes? No?
Senator, I can't give you a yes or no answer to that question.
Health care a human right? Is health care a human right?
In the way that free speech is a human right,
Yeah.
I would say it's different because with free speech doesn't cost anybody anything, but in healthcare, if you smoke cigarettes for 20 years and you get cancer, you are now taking from the pool.
Well,
and so are you guaranteed the same right, or is there also a duty?
I'm sorry. I'd love to talk for an hour with you. We got a few minutes left here. All right. Every other country on earth says health care, whether you're poor or rich, young or old, is a human right. I'm not hearing you say that. All right. You've talked about the drug companies, and maybe we agree on this one. As you all know, despite the drug companies making over $100 billion in profits, paying CEOs outrageous compensation packages, we, in some cases, pay 10 times more for the same drug. will you support legislation that I will introduce which says that in America we should not be paying a nickel more for prescription drugs than people around the rest of the world? Yes, no?
To equalize it,
Not to equalize it, that we should not be paying more than other countries for the same damn drug.
President Trump has asked me, in fact, I had a meeting with President Trump a week ago where we showed him the charts.
He knows the charts.
We're
Question is,
paying 10 times more from Europe.
that's right. And are you going to commit to us that you will end that absurdity?
I think in principle we can. We should end that disparity.
Good. Okay. That's great. All right. I happen to believe that climate change is real, it's an existential threat, and it is a healthcare issue. Donald Trump thinks that it is a hoax originating in China. Question is, in your judgment, is climate change a hoax or is it real, causing devastating problems?
President Trump and I, from the beginning, from our first meeting, agreed to disagree on that issue. I believe climate change is existential. My job is to make Americans healthy again.
All right, you believe that, you think
I'm,
you disagree with Trump, you don't think climate change is a hoax, is what I'm hearing.
my job here is to
I'm
make
just
Americans
asking you that,
healthy.
Mr. Kennedy, not a trick question.
I answered your question, Senator Sanders.
Okay, you disagree with the president on that.
I answered your question.
Okay. I'm going to pick up on a point that Senator Hassan made. Look, there is no question that abortion is a divisive issue in this country. I would say a majority of the people are pro-choice. There's a strong minority who are pro-life. A year and a half ago, you went to New Hampshire, running for president, gave a speech, and you talked about government should not tell a woman what she can do with her own body. That's her choice. Now, I think everybody on that side is pro-life. I think everybody here is pro-choice. I have never seen any major politician flip on that issue quite as quickly as you did when Trump asked you to become HHS secretary. Tell me why you think people should have confidence in your consistency and in your word when you really made a major U-turn on an issue of that importance in such a short time.
Senator, I believe, and I've always believed, that every abortion is a tragedy.
But you told the people in New Hampshire that it was their right. All right, let me do a last question here because I'm running out of time. I think the gist of what you're trying to say today is you're really pro-vaccine, you want to ask questions. You have started a group called the Children's Health Defense. You're the originator. Right now, as I understand it, on their website, they are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now, you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now that you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market?
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
That was just a few months ago. You founded that. You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with leadership.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blackburn.